Hey everyone, thanks for coming to my channel. Today we'll be going over all the subclass keywords before the final shape. You know, the highlighted keywords you usually see when you hover over a fragment or something. We'll be going over what they do, their duration, and many more things. Maybe you need a little refresher or just got into the game. Either way, this will help you have a better understanding. Do be aware that these are always subject to change by Bungie in the future, so do keep that in mind. Let's get into it. Arc. The arc keyword Amplify gives you plus 50 mobility, plus 40 handling, and 33% increased flight distance for 15 seconds. This also gives you access to the speed booster effect, which activates after 2 seconds of sprinting. This gives you 12.5% increased movement speed, 25% increased jump height, 50% increased flight distance, and 15% damage resist against enemies. Applying Arc Blind makes enemies disoriented and not able to attack or use abilities. For Guardians, they will have their HUD removed. The screen will turn white and the audio will be distorted for 3 seconds. Ionic Traces is an element to pick up which seeks to you and gives you ability energy. You get 12.5% grenade and melee energy and also 15% class ability energy. Jolt is something you can apply to enemies, and once it's applied, damaging a jolted enemy will make them release chain lightning to nearby targets for 10 seconds. This can also stun overload champions. Void. Devour will heal you 100 HP on activation and give you grenade energy on kill. This lasts for 10 seconds. On a Warlock, the effect is doubled. The duration can also get extended as long as you get kills while Devour is active. Invisibility turns the user invisible and removes you from radar. Enemies don't directly target you and Guardians aren't able to see your health bar, but the radar will ping you every 5 seconds while invis or when you sprint or jump. Also, things like using abilities or shooting will take you out of invis. Void Overshow gives you an overshow with 45 HP for 10 seconds. You also get 50% damage resist against Cabans. This doesn't apply to PvP. Void Breach is an element to pick up which gives you 12.5% class ability energy. There's also a 5-second cooldown between creation. Suppression is a debuff that lasts for 10 seconds. Suppressed enemies are basically stunned and don't fire at you, just like blind. Guardians will be taking out their super and won't be able to use abilities and movement abilities. This won't work on bosses or champions, but this will stun an overload champion. Volatile is a debuff that can be applied to enemies. Volatile enemies explode after receiving damage, and when you have volatile rounds, you can pierce a barrier champion's shield. Weaken is a debuff that can be applied to enemies. Weakened enemies receive 50% more damage from everything and lasts for 5 seconds. Some weakened effects can be stronger than others, like the Shadow Shot super for example. Solar. Kiara can be applied to yourself and your allies. This will instantly heal you for 60 HP on each stack, for 2 stacks. And this effect is halved in PvP. Fire Sprites is an element to pick up which grants 12.5% grenade energy on pickup. This also has a 5-second cooldown between creation. Radiant can be applied to weapons and increase weapon damage by 25% for 10 seconds. Being Radiant also lets you pierce a barrier champion's shield. Restoration is a continuous heal per second at 35 HP at times 1 and 50 HP at times 2. This lasts for 4 seconds and can't be interrupted. Scorch can be applied to enemies and they take damage over time which stops HP regen. Higher Scorch attacks cost more Scorch damage. Different sources can apply different amounts of Scorch attacks, and when an enemy reaches 100 Scorch attacks, they will cause an ignition and explode, damaging nearby enemies. Stasis. Stasis shards are an element to pick up which grants melee energy and can be picked up by allies. These shards last for 20 seconds and grant 10% melee energy for small shards and 50% for large shards. Stasis crystals are frozen pillars that can be shattered and, depending on their size, can last up to 15 seconds. Upon creation, they freeze nearby enemies within 2.6 meters. These crystals can be shattered and this damages enemies in an 8-meter radius. Frost armor can be applied to you and gives damage resist depending on the amount of stacks you have. This is 4.5% per stack for PvE and 2% per stack for PvP. This comes out to 22.5% damage resist at the max of 5 stacks for 9 seconds. Whisper of Rhyme increases this to 8 stacks with a damage resist of 36% and a duration of 13 seconds. Slow is a debuff that reduces the target's movement speed by 40% and makes combatants less accurate. Guardians have reduced jump height and aren't able to use their movement abilities. They take increased flinch and have a penalty to their weapon stats. Flow is kinda like Scorch, but reaching 100 flow stacks can freeze a target. Also, flowing an overload champion can stun it, freeze. When enemies are frozen, they can't move, shoot, or use abilities. But if you need to get out of it quick, you can just use your super. Frozen enemies take 10% more damage from special and heavy weapons, and also abilities. And they take 5% reduced damage from primary weapons in PvE, and that's 50% in PvP. Combatants are frozen for 6 seconds in PvE. but Guardians are frozen for about 1 second if it's a basic freeze like an ability, and frozen for about 4 seconds when it's related to Guardian freezing with their super, or a combatant freezing you. Shatter frozen enemies take damage and also damage surrounded enemies in a 6 meter radius. Also, freezing and shattering an unstoppable champion can stun it. Strand. Tangles are an element to pick up that can be picked up manually with the interaction. They spawn after an enemy affected by a strand debuff is killed while on a strand subclass. This lasts for 20 seconds on the ground and 20 seconds when picked up. It also has a 12-second cooldown. Shooting a tangle creates an explosion around it, damaging enemies, and grappling a tangle will refill your grapple. Grapple tangles can only be created by hunters when they use a grapple grenade or by the exotic navigator at the moment. They behave as a tangle for grappling. This lasts for about 17 seconds and can be refreshed by 5 seconds when using grapple on it. Grappling it doesn't take away your grapple grenade charge. Threadlings are strand summons that chase enemies and jump onto them. They explode on contact but return after traveling 14 meters, and if you're on Warlock, they come and get perched on the Warlock. Having Woven Mail grants 45% damage resist in PvE and 25% in PvP, which lasts for 10 seconds. Precision hits and melee attacks from Guardians can bypass the damage resist. Sever reduces a target's damage by 40% in PvE and 15% in PvP. This lasts for 10 seconds in PvE and 5 seconds in PvP. Suspend holds enemies mid-air. They're unable to move, shoot, or use abilities. However, suspended Guardians are still able to shoot but can't ADS. Also, suspending an unstoppable champion can stun it. Unravel is a debuff, and affected unravel targets release 3 seeking strand threads when they're damaged. Those threads attack nearby enemies or attack the affected target. This has about 1 second cooldown, but when you have unraveling rounds, you're able to damage a barrier champion's shield. And that's about it.